Okay, here we are. Welcome everybody to week number 2, exploring the soul trait of loving kindness. Um, I think we had so much fun with movie time last week. We're going to do it again this week. We'll watch a little bit more of the same film. First, we'll begin the way we always do with a short meditation to create a sacred space to help us all become present. So please close your eyes and relax in your seat. And take in a deep breath through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And inhale through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And if thoughts should come into your head, just observe them and let them go. Like watching your car move past on the road. Now is not the time for solving problems. All you need to do is inhale through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And on your next inhale, say to yourself, Shema. And on the exhale, listen. Shema, listen. In Shema, we're listening deeply, without judgment, without offering advice. In Shema, we are listening with an open heart. Shema, listen. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Hi, Stephanie. Hi, Harry. Welcome. Nice to see you. Okay. Well, we are going to do movie time, and it'll be 2 or 3 minutes again. What I'd like you to do, though, is to pay attention because he talks about some things that kind of hold us back from practicing loving kindness and also some ways to practice loving kindness. So afterwards, we're going to talk about that. So we'll watch the movie, and then what are some of these kind of specific points, these little nuggets that stand out for you? Can you see the movie?
Mhm.
Okay, great.
So we have choice. But in business and in life,
Oh, just one thing. The father, before we watch this, told the story about a businessman who said that if someone in business does acts of kindness, they will be more successful in the business. So there's some discussion about that. That's kind of part of the backstory.
we can't afford to be too nice. There are a lot of sharks out there, and we have to protect ourselves to ensure our survival. But that's a paradox. That's my point. When we're afraid, we lose our capacity to feel and react to another human being's pain because we're concentrating on our survival. But that capacity to feel another person's hurt and pain and help them is precisely what distinguishes us as human beings. So in the process of protecting our own interests, we actually turn ourselves into the animal. So what do you suggest? Connect with the other person by being giving, being kind, hearing their needs. It will break the cycle of fear, and it will allow both of you to grow. Daddy, are you saying we should just all be giving all the time and let other people walk all over us? Of course not. Even the business professor showed that there are some givers that are not able to recognize when someone is just taking all the time. Those givers get burnt out and are unsuccessful, like everything. It's a balance. So ultimately, it's safer to focus on defending myself. Of course not. Reach out to the other person with a kind gesture. Ask them to explain their point of view. Stand in their shoes and then really listen. Even if you eventually discover that you have to defend yourself, you'll be much more effective if you understand the person's point of view. But who knows? You might even become partners. But fear just shuts everything down. Fear and compassion don't mix. Fear and creativity don't mix. Fear just makes you afraid. But what if they don't make sense to me? What if they're fundamentally different than me? There was a patient in a psychiatric hospital who would spend the entire day standing in a twisted pose, his body all crooked, and he wouldn't ever move except to go to sleep and to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But as soon as he woke up in the morning, as soon as he finished the meal, he would get back into the pose and not move and not speak. Wait, is this a real story? Yes, it's real. I heard it from my friend Dr. Tversky. This patient was mentally ill, schizophrenia. For 52 years this went on. All the specialists tried everything to solve the problem, but nothing worked. Then, one day, a medical student saw the patient and said to him, "It must be exhausting standing like that all day. Go sit down." No response. So then, the medical student stands next to the patient and very carefully copies the exact pose of the patient and says, "Don't worry, I'll stand here like this. You can go sit down and rest for a while." And for the first time in 52 years, the patient goes and sits down. Wow. We always want other people to see our point of view, Hanan. But how often do we really try and see things from the other person's perspective? It requires us to choose to reach outside of ourselves and connect like the 3-year-old.
Okay. So that's our movie time for the week. So our question, how do we decide whether to be kind? What are some of the factors? What are some of the things that stood out for you from this little snippet? Okay, Joanne and then Bonnie.
Well, I guess what stood out for me, I guess this was relating to business, but really life in general is, you make a choice. You have a choice. Are you going to reach out and try to empathize with the other person? Or is fear going to keep you from doing that? And then I guess depending on the response, or if you think the person's taking advantage, or if it's, if you're really connecting, I mean, that guides your behavior going forward. That's what I took.
Thank you so much, Joanne. Bonnie, and then Alyssa.
I think for me, it means not doing what I continually do. If I'm in a situation that I'm uncomfortable in, and I have had this one. In fact, I was looking at your document last week that said, forgive someone out of loving kindness, even if you think they're at fault and should make the first move. To try to think, to be in their shoes. I know it's an old saying and it gets overused, but the medical student, instead of telling him what to do, the way I heard it was stood next to him in the same pose and gave this person the option of sitting down. And I will take your place. And I thought that was really very moving. I don't know if I could always do that, but it's something to reach for.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think unless we're reaching for it, we won't do it. I mean, maybe this medical student was just inspired in that moment, and it's not to say that we couldn't have moments like that, but clearly this person was paying attention. Alyssa.
Yes, what struck me the most was the point which was made, trying to see things from the other person's perspective. And I wanted to add something to this, though, if I may.
Please.
Loving kindness is an attribute of God. Someone who helps a person in time of need has a divine spark, emulating God's radiance, as is defined in Psalm 27, "The Lord is my light and my rescue." And also, I realize that there are different types of acts of loving kindness, some which involve taking an action, which involves some preparation, visiting the sick, attending a Shiva service, but acts of loving kindness are also spontaneous. And recently in the news, the news recounted the story of a woman who was on board a flight. She was knitting a sweater for a friend or relative. The neighboring passenger was an infant who was looking intently at her handiwork. So the woman decided to knit a hat for the child as well. And those are examples of loving kindness.
Yeah, those are wonderful, wonderful examples. Thank you so much. That was a great.
You're welcome.
Love the love bringing in the Psalm 27 as well. Other thoughts? Yeah, Harry.
I'm just reminded by the classic habit of the 7 habits of highly effective people, and that is to seek to understand before being understood. In other words, don't react and be curious and try to understand the person you're dealing with, or whether it's for loving kindness or for anything else, and not be reactive.
Yeah. No, that's good. There's a saying I heard recently, and I may not get this exactly right, but it's like no one will care what you have to say until they see that you care about them. So other thoughts, other takeaways from this movie. So I started a little list beforehand, and I added what Joanne said to the list while she was talking, and then I stopped taking notes because that was a distraction. But one thing which I thought was very helpful was this: try to notice if you're giving all the time. These videos are by Hanan Harkol. He has a whole bunch of them. I put a link to the original video in the notes to the YouTube recording of last week. But he really understands Mussar. And so giving too much kindness, if you're giving all the time, that's a danger. And the research supported that you're actually less successful. So it's not about all giving all the time, it's giving the right way in a reciprocal. Get to see their point of view. We talked about that. His last point was the one Joanne was talking about. We have a choice to reach out or will fear prevent it. And I really liked that idea that fear can get in the way of kindness. And if we are being fearful, yeah, then it is much, much harder to be kind. Okay, well, let's take it a little bit deeper. Let's see. So when we're starting to talk about fear, and this is a little bit related to what Joanne was talking about, is we have this conflict between the evil inclination and the good inclination. And in this context, we could think of the evil inclination as our fear, or fear that someone's going to take advantage of us, fear that we're going to look stupid. And then the good inclination is, that wanting to see the other person's perspective. But maybe, what are some of the fears? I named 2, but what are some of the other fears that might hold us back, that might prevent us from either trying to see the other person's point of view or to prevent us from doing something kind. What else might we be afraid of? Yeah, Sarah.
Well, what I thought of was being fearful that someone's going to steal your idea, you know, because this is in a business setting. But I liked the part in the film where it was talking about fear. If you're fearful, you can't be compassionate or creative.
Mm.
And then, if you're, and then one of them said to the other, they might turn out to be your partner,
Yeah.
so like
Mhm.
it's like a wall, and it stops from interaction, and it might be something fabulous,
Yeah.
the interaction. So
That's right. Awesome. And although they were talking about the business context, of course, feel free to kind of extrapolate, that was an example. But thank you, Sarah. That was a good example. Joanne, and then either Linda or Frank.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it's sort of similar to what Sarah was saying. I mean, that you're afraid someone's going to take advantage of your kindness or,
Mm.
Be greedy, or like to take and not give back, or, well, on the other hand, or being rejected by the other
Mm.
person. So that's some of the fears, I guess, that I have, because I'm a little shy and
Mm.
I have to overcome that to reach out.
Yeah. One of there's some friends who are actually had their parents living with them. They had a 3 or 4 generation family, and someone who was really sick, and husband said to the wife, "Stop telling people no when they offer to bring food over. Just let them bring the food over, and that can be, a form of rejection too. Hey, can I help? Can I bring you, let me bring you a casserole. No, no, thanks. Oh, okay. Let's see, Linda or Frank.
Yeah, I just thought about something that over time and more recently is that we may be fearful, and that people, especially about any topic or interest, or both personal and maybe professional. But sometimes when when you have disagreements, when you don't see eye to eye, when you take the risk, and that's what the film was suggesting, is you might become partners. And
Yeah.
I remember somebody didn't think much about, I think, this project of developing co-op housing.
Mm.
And so we had some conversations, and he became a big ally.
Mm.
And most recently, I may have shared this with, I'm trying to kind of have, coffee or such with people who are, with the Israeli situation, who have opposite of point of view for me.
Mm.
And by doing that, it's a little scary, but I think it's really important, because that's the only way you could kind of get your point across, but also hear the other voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's when somebody hears us, I think we appreciate it, and I think that's vice versa.
Yes.
So I think hesitation is one of the reasons that maybe hard time to
Yes.
do this.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Marianne, I couldn't tell if you had your hand up earlier or if you were just kind of, moving your hand. Nope. Okay. So Toby and then Karen.
I think sometimes in these situations where we are fearful, what we forget is that the other person may be fearful too,
Mm.
and that their reactions may come from their fear of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of goes back to what sort of Barney was referring to, somebody has to take the first step, even if we think it's their fault, but maybe I'm going to take the first step anyway. I'm going to do that reaching out. even though I'm afraid and they're afraid and we're both mad. Karen.
I think it's easier to reach out and be kind if we have parameters and boundaries to protect ourselves when we do this, so that we can offer assistance, but not fall into the trap of being called all the time because we went once or twice. Calling somebody, just a random act of kindness, whatever it is. I think the idea of doing good for others, but being comfortable enough to say, I can do it this time, but I can't do it another time, like when or how to say yes and no, and still be caring, but protect yourself. So I think that possibly fear from that would keep us from being kind is maybe because we're not sure of our parameters and our boundaries for the activities that we would engage in acts of kindness.
I really love that connection, Karen, and it reminds me some of the Kabbalistic teachings where you have like Chesed and Gevurah, kindness and strength. And strength is all about setting boundaries, because God's kindness would be limitless, and without sort of Gevurah to set boundaries, you couldn't do justice, you couldn't do other things. So I see somebody's on the phone. Who's on the phone?
Martin.
Hey, Martin.
Hi. Good.
Thanks for joining.
I am driving. That's why I'm on the telephone. Okay.
Okay, well, drive safely, and glad you can join. I just always, because there's no name and we don't see you, I just always want to make sure it's someone who's legit in the community. So let's see. I see we have Linda Frank again. Looks like you're unmuted.
Yeah, I think that it's possible to get into some habitual reactions, like when someone says something that I don't agree with or that I think is kind of dumb. And I'm used to reacting in a certain way. That it's very helpful to have a group like this that I can ask myself to think about some of my reactions. Because when you're habitual, you may not even have thought about, is there another way that I can respond that would be helpful to the other person and helpful to me?
Wonderful. Yeah, absolutely. You know, that's one of the advantages of a spiritual practice like Mussar. It can help us kind of step back and do that inner work and that introspection and bring some level of choice and mindfulness to kind of our habitual reactions. So thank you for bringing that in. And absolutely, that can slow us down from being kind. Sarah.
I wrote down about fear. Sometimes people are fearful because they don't think there's going to be enough. You know, if I reach out and share my ideas, say in business, someone will take it, and you know, and it's of there not being enough. And then I wrote down scarcity versus abundance. You know, if you have a scarcity mindset that people are going to steal your ideas or people are going to be mean before they're going to be kind, then you're not going to take the risk and be nice. And it's sort of like with love, you know, love versus hate, you know. What are you going to lead with? It's, you know,
what are you going to lead with? Great question.
But I mean, scarcity versus abundance, I think, you know, it's like, I remember a long time ago, I read a book, I think it was called How to Have More in a Have Not World, Terry Cole Whitaker. Anyway, but it's just about that idea that there's abundance and there is enough.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of think of like jealousy, you know, it's like when you're jealous, what are you jealous of? Somebody's gonna, you know, it's just fear. I guess it's just fear.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of interesting.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, well, let's go. I am a big fan of the Book of Ruth. And as a way to, shoot, I'm trying to find the button to go back to, here we go. So we looked at this bottom bullet last week. Someone want to read this top one as kind of a, we've been talking about this, but I think it's important for this next section to revisit the definition. So can someone please unmute and read this first definition?
I'll read. Often translated as loving kindness, chesed refers to acts of benevolence that one does out of kindness, not out of any obligation. Tamara Cohen Ashkenazi, JPS Bible Commentary.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, we're doing these acts out of kindness, not out of obligation. And when we look at the book of Ruth, it is one of the later books in the Hebrew Bible. And it's a story about a young Moabite woman who has married a Jewish man, and her mother-in-law, Naomi, came to Moab with her husband and her two sons, and her two sons got married to local women, and then both sons and the husband died. And she's going to go home, and one daughter-in-law, she tells the daughter-in-laws to go back, and one daughter-in-law goes back, but Ruth stays with her. And there's this very famous saying, wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you sleep, I will sleep. Wherever you die, I will die. And she's, so they kind of get back to Naomi's hometown. And then Ruth goes out. Oh, that's Ruth asks, doesn't Ruth goes out to kind of glean, to gather leftover food from the fields. And there's this guy, Boaz, who has this field. And he's very nice to her. And he lets her, not only glean, but he gives her some extra food. And so she says, why were you so kind to me when I'm a foreigner? And he said, I was told of all that you did for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband. So, then we see that Ruth goes back to Naomi and she tells him how Boaz was kind, and Naomi blesses Boaz. But not only really blessing Boaz, is blessing God, because she's seeing God's hand in all of this. And so then can someone read this third bullet, please? Lisa, I don't know if I saw your hand go up electronically earlier. Would you like to read this one?
Sure. The third one,
Yeah.
God's kindness is invoked by human beings, is also enacted by them. To put it another way, the kindness of human beings reveals the kindness of a God.
Thank you. And that's from Alicia Ostreicher from our book, Ruth and the Love of the Land. So let's talk about this idea, this connection. Is it that, what do we think of this idea that sort of, sometimes the idea comes up, well, where was God when such and such happened? And some of us may be very unsure about the divinity, but is there something to be said for this point of view, or at least in this literature, it's putting forth this point of view that God is acting through people. You agree, disagree, comfortable, uncomfortable with that? Yes, Alyssa.
Yes, could you please repeat what you just said, what your question was?
Yeah, sorry. Let me put this quote in the chat. And we'll slow it down a little bit and take it, my question, a couple of stages. So first of all, what's kind of the main point of this? What is Alicia Ostreicher saying about kindness and the relationship to God and God's kindness? Yeah, Sarah.
It's that divine spark that we all have, and it's sort of it's a godlike quality. And so that's why it pays to be kind, to make the world a better place, and also to act in a godly way.
Yeah, so thank you. And that's something we've talked about before, is that, walking in God's way and doing these acts of kindness, that's walking in a godly way. Fantastic. Other thoughts? Yeah, Marianne.
So if God acts through us, then maybe does he also, if somebody does something, unhelpful, is that God acting through us?
Great question. That's kind of the door that gets opened when you start going down this road a little bit, potentially. Does this call into question free will?
This is Martin. May I make a comment?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's something I mentioned in earlier conversations. Yeah, that's the price of free will. If God grants free will to everybody, then that's the price God paid. Then, because people are doing things that are unhelpful, such as murder, that person had free will, right? So that's the price of free will, perhaps. Okay.
Yeah, I had this sort of flippant thought, if I were just a person in the audience, it's like, yeah, if somebody does murder, that's free will. And if someone does an act of kindness, that's God's hand. So, but nonetheless, there's a lot of different ways to think about theology and what God does. And Judaism doesn't have a God and a devil. So once you've kind of opened the door to God, God has offered free will, but maybe God is offering choices all the time. And that we're offered, a choice of the kindness, or there's also the choice of the fear. And where, I don't, have any kind of monopoly on these answers. And it's funny, I feel like I talk about God more and more as the years go by, having started with you don't need to believe in God to be here, and you still don't, but it is interesting. I'm noting this trend in myself a little bit. And I'm taking a class on Hasidism right now, so it's kind of hard to escape God in that. We're learning about that stuff.
That's right.
Aaron.
This
It's a
is a
good
bit
observation.
tangential. This is tangential, but I have come to my own personal understanding that God gives me free will within boundaries. So I'm just throwing that out there for people to think about. I feel like there are boundaries that relate to destiny, fate, whatever it is. And that kind of like playing a pinball game, although in a much wider sphere, that I have been, let go by God into this world. not able to comprehend, everything, but within my ability to comprehend, I have room to make decisions. At least I like to think that I'm making some decisions, and but anyway, so that's how I see this, and I just thought I would throw that out tangentially for other people to think about.
Thank you, Karen. Lisa, and then Harry.
I think that God is an exemplary model of benevolence, and by following his mitzvot, we emulate him. We emulate God.
Thank you. Harry.
Now, there's another thought about our relationship with God that's interesting. We think about God acting upon us. There is a theory that says that we're partners with God. We're here to help God perfect the world, make the world a better place. And so we play an important role along with God to make a difference.
Absolutely. And if we have this kind of exemplar that's out there and we have an opportunity to kind of do an act of kindness, I'm going to stick by this law and go with her back to her country. I'm going to, oh, this person did a good deed for their mother-in-law. I'm going to really look out for them. Is that if we're inspired by God to do that, is that God's hand working through us? Metaphorically, I think that could hold together too. And then it is our free will, and we're being inspired by certain standards. Bonnie.
So Heschel talks about being in partnership with God. I struggle reading Heschel, by the way. I don't know if other people do, but I struggle. But the partnership makes sense for me. And one of the pieces for me, being in a 12-step program, that I haven't ever been able to reconcile is turn it over to God. And I will, in my mind, when I've done everything I can on my part, and that's where the partnership comes in for me, then I can turn it over to God. Doesn't mean I don't think about it all the time, but I at least stopped acting on it. And so I really like the partnership.
Yeah, thank you. A lot of powerful ideas today. We're going to revisit the spectrum diagram, and then that is going to be the subject of conversation for the breakout rooms. So we had talked about this idea of sustaining others without the thought of reward, even if they don't deserve it. But we act on a spectrum. We have too little loving kindness. We can be selfish. We are not thinking about other people at all. But if we have too much, we can kind of be doting, not taking care of ourselves. Like in the video, the person who's always giving, and then that leads to kind of burnout or feeling use and other with a small a. Just not, not working out well. So where, with your partner, where do you fall on the spectrum of loving kindness? And maybe what's your aspiration for growth? So I'm going to stop sharing and set up the rooms. Okay, the rooms are open. If you have been streaming, let's try that again without the mute. Okay, everybody, welcome back. I hope you had a good conversation. Yes, Bonnie, jumping right in.
So this was fascinating because three of us, first of all, Lisa lives lives about 20 minutes, 15 minutes from me in California. And Harry is on the other side of the country. But I raised the issue of loving kindness with my adult kids. And it turned out that the three of us had exactly the same angst, is the only word I could use. Yes, Larry. I'm not sure that's where you thought the conversation was going to go, but we could have had hours. And Harry recommended a book called Walking on Eggshells, Dealing with Your Adult Children.
Oh.
And if I ever thought that this would come up in Mussar, Greg, we could have continued for hours, seriously.
Well, I encourage you to do so. You know, that's the kind of beauty of Mussar, and that's why I like us to have an opportunity for these breakout groups. And someone had posted in the chat wanting to get a little bit more of life experience in, and we bring whatever we bring into the room with us, and that's all within bounds. So, yeah, if there's no other time, then the breakout rooms is a place where that can happen. Yes, Karen.
So I like to think that loving kindness, different from kindness, is trying to find out what the other person will perceive as a kindness. So that instead of doing what I think is kind and helpful for someone else, trying to find out if that's something that they would view as kind or helpful. And if they wouldn't view it that way, then it doesn't matter if I think that this is what would be good for them. So I'm going to be kind and do this because they're not going to like it.
Yeah.
But if I can find out what they might like, it might not be what I think is best for them. But if I can see that in, some way it would be good for them, then my kindness is to do that. And if I really can't see that, then I guess maybe I don't do that. I can't always do that, but I try to find out what it is that somebody else will perceive as a kindness before I go ahead and decide what I think would be a kindness for them.
Well, it's a really good point. It reminds me of something when I was a teenager. I was working in a grocery store, and there was a blind man who used to come in, and we would kind of lead him around to the aisle, and then he would tell us what we wanted and I would give him the prices of the different brands, and then he would say which one. And part of me was like, why can't you just give me your darn list and sit at the front and let me go grab all your food and bring it to you? But that wasn't what he wanted. He wanted to be as independent as he could be. And I see a lot of nods, something we all can do. And that was, so thank you, Karen. Your story your point reminded me of that experience. Joanne.
Yeah, so in my group, we all, talked about having issues when the other person's disagreeable or disgruntled or says something nasty, and how we can like sort of center ourselves and we came up with some strategies like taking a pause, counting to 4, taking a breath, before responding, so we could respond in a more loving way. And I thought those were all great ideas. It's a challenge.
It is. Thank you. Nancy.
Yeah, I hope I'm going to be articulate enough. What we kind of talked about was, and chime in if if I'm not saying it right, but we never really know what someone is going through. We think we do, but we don't. And so to try to do an act of loving kindness may not be an act of loving kindness. It could be out of fear or selfishness on their part, because they're really trying to protect themselves. So in terms of being loving and kind, we don't know what that would mean for them, kind of like if I understood what Karen said. But for me, sometimes doing nothing is being loving and kind. Sometimes reaching out from their side they may feel it's loving and kind, but it's more hurtful to the other person because they're really trying to protect themselves. So I find that being loving and kind can be a very tricky thing. It sounds easy, but it's not, because we don't know what anybody is going through, and even if what they say is not really what they mean or say, and that's so esoteric, that's a whole nother course. But nothing is real. This is all a dream. This is all an illusion. Nothing that's happening right now is really happening, but trying to be may not be really loving and kind.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. And I was reminded a little bit, it got touched on in the video, kind of where we started today. It was also, talk to the other person. And, as you say, they may not even know what they want or need, but it's kind of easier than just sort of jumping in, which may not be helpful at all. Marianne.
I don't know if Nancy wants to do this, but I was totally confused by what she said. If she could give like an example, I might understand what she's saying, but if Nancy, if you don't want to, that's fine too.
Yeah, you mean you're confused about the whole idea that if somebody were to be loving and kind, it could be out of fear and selfishness?
Yeah, like can you give it like an example, a concrete example, even if you make one up? But if you don't want to, that's fine.
I'm not sure exactly how to answer that, except think about some time that you might have thought you were being loving and kind for yourself. It really was for yourself. It really had nothing to do with that other person. Does that make it any clearer?
A little bit, yeah. Thank you.
Like, I'm thinking of an example, and Nancy, you can tell me if this is on track, where it was like, oh, I brought you a birthday cake. But it wasn't my favorite flavor. It was the person who brought me the cake's favorite flavor. And as a matter of fact, I didn't like that flavor and had told them I didn't like that flavor. Not that I'm saying this was a real example that happened to me, mind you. This is hypothetical, but that's kind of what I'm thinking about, where it gets rationalized as, oh, I'm doing this great thing and bringing you this cake. It's like, you know, I'm gluten-free. I can't eat that cake. Oh, okay. Well, I'll just take the whole cake then, since you can't eat it, But we'll hear from Bonnie, and then it'll be time for us to do our closing meditation.
So Nancy, maybe, who was asking for, Mariana was, often I think, I hope I don't, but I might, when I'm going to look for a gift for somebody and I don't know them very well, it is, what would I like to get? Because I don't know them. That to me makes a lot more sense to going for a gift for one of my adult kids, and which I know what they like and what they don't like, and still saying to myself, what would I like if I was getting the gift? I think does that make it any clearer, Mariana? I don't know if that's what you were talking about, Nancy, but that's what I know. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Fine.
It's not that those aren't. I think both Greg's and your example are good, but basically, we do not know what anybody is going through, no matter what it is. We may think we do. So we're going to offer a loving kindness out of our own fear and
So I was wondering what she would be thinking.
taking care of ourselves to be sure that well, everything works out for everybody. But we really don't know. We don't know anything about anybody else, no matter how much we think we do.
Okay, well, this is a very rich topic this week, and So we could certainly continue, but it is time for us once more to close our group for the week. So please relax in your chair and close your eyes. Taking a nice leisurely inhale and a nice leisurely exhale. And on your next inhale, just feel strength and confidence coming in. And on the exhale, let the fear go. Just breathe in that strength and confidence and curiosity. And breathe out the fear and the reactiveness. And take a few more easy breaths. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes.